Hello, and welcome to today's podcast. All about vulnerability. As I sit here and record this, the last 6, 7, 8 months of my life have put me in such a state of vulnerability. And everybody keeps telling me what a gift that is of mine, that I can show up and be so vulnerable. And to me, it doesn't feel like a gift because it's so natural. And yet I also know I'm an emotional person and that my emotions are a superpower of mine. I've talked about this before in the podcast. But I want to talk to you guys about being vulnerable today because there's so many gifts in when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Because it's been reflected back to me about how much people admire how vulnerable I am. And what that says to me is that it says that people are afraid to be vulnerable themselves. And so I want to talk to you about it today. I want to talk to you about vulnerability, what it is, how it feels, what it does when you can actually show up and be vulnerable. Be yourself, okay? So I was going to sit down and record a different podcast episode today, but this is what came through to me because I was just in Boxer with my mentor, Echo Summerhill, and I showed up and was really vulnerable in a space, not with Echo, but in another space. And I'm like, hey, this is what I was feeling. And it made me actually feel less than, and this is why, and like feelings of unworthiness, and that's for me to unpack and me to heal. And I'm so grateful for it, right? Oftentimes, and I wasn't triggered, I wasn't activated. It was just like right now my consciousness, my awareness is going up so high that I just feel like I'm almost not even sitting in my physical body, in this physical vessel. And I'm just like, my soul's like outside of my body, watching my body react to things and just becoming so aware of it. And I feel like this is so true here. And so when I showed up in this space and was really vulnerable and shared these like, whoa, this is what just came through for me and I felt really unworthy, I just typed that out in this group thread and I said how I was feeling. And then I went to Echo and I'm like, this just happened because I shared this and no one has responded yet. And it's interesting to me that I shared this level of vulnerability. I went really deep with how I was feeling. And I was waiting for somebody to come back and be like, Jess, it's okay. That's not you, to reassure me. So it has me thinking, am I allowing myself to get really vulnerable because I'm waiting for somebody else to respond? It's like a way for me to be reassured. Because that's not what I'm going for. Because I know my truth is I am worthy. I don't need these things, these external things to prove that I'm worthy, to prove that I get to show up in this space and be fully authentically me. I don't need anybody to tell me that. That lives inside me. So instead, I'm sharing my truth because that's really how I felt. And I'm just sharing it for me. And I said that in the message. I'm like, I'm just sharing this. This is my thing to do. And also, I went on to say a couple other things. But when I shared this with Echo, she came back. She's like, I just want to honor your vulnerability because not everyone can be as vulnerable as you. And in what these last, like in what we've walked through with Nick's job and making some really big decisions for our family and selling our dream home and moving and building another really has taught me I've always worn my heart on my sleeve, but I'm so vulnerable in how I show up because that's my truth. That's who I am. I don't sugarcoat anything. I'm going to tell you how I feel. I'm going to tell you what I see for you. I'm going to tap into your energy. I'm going to just go all out. I'm going to be authentically me. And that's how I am in being vulnerable. And I allow myself to cry in front of people. I allow myself to swear in front of people. I allow myself to show up in ways that a lot of people are afraid to show up because I live in my truth. Every day. I'm still evolving into every moment of every day in my truth, right? Because there are still some times when I'm like, oh, I can't be all of me right now because this person needs this or in this situation or whatever. I'm getting there, and my ultimate goal, and all of us, right? Ultimate freedom should be, can we authentically be ourselves every moment of every minute of every day, no matter where we are, no matter if I'm working, if I'm with a client, if I'm with my husband, if I'm with my children, if I'm with my children's teacher, if I'm watching TV, if I'm on a phone call, wherever it is, can I be authentically me? But when we show up with this level of vulnerability, well, I would love to hear from you guys. I wish that like this was a little interactive. I would love to hear if you feel like you're vulnerable. So send me a DM on Instagram. Let's talk about vulnerability. How vulnerable do you think you are? And those people who cry often, those people who are vulnerable and tell you exactly how they feel or what exactly is in their mind, how do you respond to those people when they show up in that way and they're really vulnerable with you? How do you show up in a way when, if somebody's crying, how do you show up for them? How do you show up for yourself? Do you hold space? Do you comfort? Do you just listen? Do you walk away and you're like, I can't handle a crying person? I'll tell you, oftentimes, and Nick and I have really worked through this, but oftentimes when I would cry, when I used to cry, and actually even through this big transition that we've moved through, it's really hard for him to see me cry. And he would say, well, what can I do? What can I do? And I would say, nothing. Just sit there and listen. Just like literally just sit there and listen. I didn't need him to fix it. And I know for a man, they want to fix things. That's their nature. And I love that about him. But it's also really important for me as a woman and how I process and my vulnerability to just cry. Sometimes I just need to cry and I let the emotion flow through me. And so how can you be vulnerable and know what you need out of the vulnerable situation? Like what I shared earlier in this message, what I really needed out of it was to let it go. And that was me processing it. That was me, in a way, alchemizing it to let it go. Those low frequency feelings that don't serve me, I put it out there. That was a concern. That was a belief that I saw. I called it out for what it was, and I alchemized it. And now my beliefs are I am worthy. Of course, I get to have anything and everything I want, right? And so, but I had to go through that vulnerable process and actually say what I thought. It's the same thing with me crying in front of Nick, or, when something happens, or, tearing up when I talk to a friend or whatever. This is my process, and that involves me being vulnerable. And I desire to be around people who can hold me in that. I don't need to be held like a baby, but just like, let me be vulnerable. Let me cry. Let me tell you my feelings. Even if it's not to make you uncomfortable. It's me, right? It's the processing. And what we've been taught, what we've been conditioned is we can't be vulnerable. It's not safe for us to be vulnerable. It's not safe for us to share our feelings. It's not safe for us to allow ourselves to be seen and held and felt authentically. We've been taught we have to become this, we have to become this, we have to look like this, we have to act like this, we have to make X amount of dollars, we have to, show up this way in our business, you got to do it this way, etc., etc., etc. I'm encouraging you to get vulnerable in your own self. What does that look like for you? What hard conversations are on the very tip of your tongue that you've attempted to have numerous times and you just can't quite get there? What are the tears that are right behind your eyes but you won't let them fall? What is the thing in the meeting that you want to say so bad, the idea that you have, but you're so afraid to be vulnerable and share it because someone might not like it in the room? Where is the place that you've been so put down, put in this box that you so badly desire to escape from that you won't dip your toe out and be vulnerable and say, actually, I meant for this? What if you just had the conversation? What if you just allowed your truth to come out and you were vulnerable to say, this is really how I feel and this is exactly what I need moving forward? I know that vulnerability is a gift. I've been told it over and over and over and over again, and it's so natural to me, it doesn't feel like a gift. But I'm allowing myself to step in and go first and say, yeah, I'm vulnerable AF. And I believe a lot of people are. They don't allow themselves to go there. So if you could get vulnerable, what would you share? What would you do? Who would you be? How would you act? Can you share it with me? Because guess what? I can hold the space for you if you want to get vulnerable. If you want to tell me some things, I can hold the space for you. That's it. Vulnerability is a gift. The more you can show up in your truth and be vulnerable and let people see you and you let the walls come down, you step out of the box, there's so much goodness in that. So how can you be vulnerable today if you need to be? Allow yourself to be that and see how it feels. Allow it to build upon vulnerability. Show up in your truth and be vulnerable if you need to be about it. I love you. I'll see you in my DMs.